Welcome to sixth grade history. We're going to be, this is lesson 167. You have a quiz 38 to go take, so you can pause the video and go take that. It's on a map, so it's on South America, so you can, pardon me, you can go take that, and then when you come back, we're going to jump right into reviewing chapters 7 through 14, okay? All right, I hope you did well with that quiz and that you remembered everything. We're going to go fairly fast. I just have some sections from each chapter checkup to ask you questions from, so I'm just going to go through those. The first European to reach what is now the U.S. mainland was who? Ponce de Leon. Okay, so he was the first European because it was before modern times. So if it asks for the modern, it's the next person. Claimed part of North America for England in 1497. He's also the first modern explorer. John Cabot, okay? Claimed the area of New York for the Dutch. Who claimed the area of New York for the Dutch? This is going back a little bit. Henry Hudson also discovered what? Hudson Bay, good. Claimed the area of New York for the French. Samuel de Champlain, okay, he was the one who claimed that. What was the lost colony founded by Sir Walter Raleigh? Roanoke, very good. And the first permanent English settlement in the New World was Jamestown, good job. And then the Pilgrims settlement was Plymouth. All right. We're going to move on. And who was the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army? George Washington, good job. Who was the commander of all British forces in North America during the French and Indian War? General Edward Braddock. King of England during the American War for Independence? King George III. And who was the Virginian who said, "Give me liberty or give me death"? Patrick Henry, all right. Who was the Boston Patriot and silversmith famous for his midnight ride to warn the colonists? Paul Revere, good job. The Patriot who captured Fort Ticonderoga from the British? Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, those are my favorite. I like them. Who did the actual writing of the Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson, right? Who was the president of the Second Continental Congress and the first to sign the Declaration? John Hancock, and he's also the one that has the most legible signature. Who was the black slave who served in the colonial army as a spy? James Armistead. Who said, "I only regret that I have but one life to lose for my country"? Nathan Hale. Who is believed to have made the first official flag of the U.S.? Betsy Ross. With his men captured several British forts in the Ohio, secured American control of the northwest frontier. Who was that man? George Rogers Clark. Who said, "I have not yet begun to fight"? John Paul Jones, he was a captain of a ship. Who was the leader of the British armies in the South? General Lord Cornwallis. Who was the leader of the American armies in the South who defeated Cornwallis? Nathaniel Greene. Who did the most important work at the Constitutional Convention? He was the fourth president of the U.S. James Madison. Who was the first vice president and second president of the U.S.? John Adams. The first Black American to write a scientific book was who? Benjamin Banneker. Very good. All right, moving right along. Who was the English founder of the Methodist Church? John Wesley. One of the most famous circuit riding preachers? Peter Cartwright. Very good. Founder of the first Black denomination was Richard Allen. All right, two English hymn writers whose words were popular during the Second Great Awakening. Who were these two? There was Isaac Watts and Charles Wesley, who was a founder of the American Bible Society and leader of the Haystack Prayer Meetings. Samuel J. Mills, all right, who was the Minuteman, patriot, and preacher. Lemuel Haynes, who was the preacher to the wounded Confederate soldiers and to the Virginia General Assembly. John Jasper, who started New York City's first Sunday school. Catherine Ferguson, who was the president during the War of 1812. Was James Madison, who saved important papers and Washington's portrait. It was Dolly Madison, his wife. She grabbed those before fleeing the White House. Who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner? Francis Scott Key, who defeated the British at the Battle of New Orleans. General Andrew Jackson, who was the president who purchased Florida from Spain. James Monroe, who was the dictator of Mexico who led Mexican forces at the Alamo. General Santa Anna, who was the frontiersman from Tennessee who helped the Texans fight at the Alamo. Davy Crockett, and who defeated Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto and later became president of Texas. General Sam Houston, okay? All right. Moving on. All right. Who was the inventor of the cotton gin? Eli Whitney, who was a freed black slave and abolitionist. Sojourner Truth was the name, who was an abolitionist and author of Uncle Tom's Cabin. Harriet Beecher Stowe, who was an escaped slave and one of the most famous leaders of the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman, okay? So Harriet Beecher Stowe was an abolitionist as well, but she was the writer, wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. Harriet Tubman was an escaped slave and did a lot with the Underground Railroad, who was a black abolitionist who helped recruit blacks for the Union Army. Frederick Douglass, who was the angel of the battlefield and founder of the American Red Cross. Clara Barton, who was the black educator and founder of Tuskegee Institute, author of Up From Slavery. Booker T. Washington, and who was the black botanist who encouraged farmers to diversify their crops and help restore the South to prosperity. His laboratory became known as God's Little Workshop. George Washington Carver, very good. All right, continuing on, who was the 20th US president, the last born in a log cabin, the fourth to die in office, and the second to be assassinated. James A. Garfield, okay? What is Charles Finney known as? A brilliant lawyer who became one of America's greatest revival preachers. What about Dwight L. Moody? He was our most famous evangelist during the 19th century. John D. Rockefeller, what's he known for? He organized the oil industry in America, created the Rockefeller Foundation to give money to charities. Who was the Secretary of State who convinced the government to buy Alaska? William H. Seward. And who was the leader of the Rough Riders during the Spanish-American War? Theodore Roosevelt. Okay, Theodore Roosevelt. I'm going to give you an invention, and I want you to tell me who invented it, okay? The mechanical reaper. Cyrus McCormick, the steamboat. Robert Fulton, telegraph and Morse code. Samuel Morse, telephone. Alexander Graham Bell. The bell rings, the telephone rings. That's how I would remember that. Electric light bulb and the phonograph. Thomas Edison, very good. Assembly line. Henry Ford. Shoe lasting process. Jan Ernst Matzeliger. Sugar refining process. Norbert Rylou. Norbert Rylou. Who invented the steamer boiler furnace, automatic air brakes, egg incubator, communication device between moving train and train stations, and 15 electrical devices for railroads? Granville T. Woods. He had grand ideas, so that's why he invented all this. So Granville T. Woods was his last name. Who invented the gas mask, and the traffic signal? Garrett A. Morgan. Who invented the airplane? Wilbur and Orville Wright. And who invented the liquid-fueled rocket? Robert Goddard. Very good. All right. Whew. We're over halfway done. So take heart, we'll be done soon. Noted educator who became the first American Black woman to head a federal agency. Mary McLeod Bethune. Mary McLeod Bethune. Who was the famous engineer who died trying to slow down his crashing train? Casey Jones. There's a song about him. Who invented the wireless telegraph? Guglielmo Marconi. Guglielmo Marconi. Who was the 26th president, helped build Panama Canal, and said, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." Theodore Roosevelt. Who led an expedition that discovered the North Pole? So sorry. Robert Peary. It did not disappear. All right, who was Peary's Black companion on expedition to the North Pole? Matthew Henson. Matthew Henson. Who was the ruler of Germany in 1914? He built up Germany's army and navy in an attempt to gain more land to control the seas. Kaiser Wilhelm II. Who was the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary? His assassination served as an excuse to start World War II. Archduke Ferdinand and his wife Isabella, if you, she also died. Who was the US president during World War I? The world must be made safe for democracy is what he is known for saying. Woodrow Wilson. Who was the first president to give his inaugural address over the radio? Calvin Coolidge. He was so cool, he got on the radio. Sorry. I know. My puns are really bad, but it's okay. Who was the British naturalist who rejected the scriptures and developed the theory of evolution? Charles Darwin, and yes, you can say his name and still not like him. I don't like him either, and I can say his name. Who was the president during the Great Depression, created jobs using government money? It was Franklin D. Roosevelt. All right. All right. What is a dictator? Person who rules by force and does not allow his subjects any freedom. What is communism? A system of government that allows no freedom and takes over private property. What is the fascist party? The party of Mussolini in Italy. People are allowed to own property, but they don't have important freedoms. The Nazi Party. National Socialist Party of Hitler in Germany. The leader and government are all powerful. All people are not equal in worth, and the leader could do no wrong. What were the Nisei? Nisei? Nisei. It was those born in the US of Japanese parents. They led an important group of soldiers in World War II. What is the Holocaust? Holocaust. It was the murder of 6 million Jews and many others during World War II. And the United Nations was what? The organization formed after World War II that was supposed to establish world peace. Did it? No. 1917. What happened then? What was the most important thing that happened in 1917? Communist Party took control of Russia. What about 1939 to 1945? What were those years known as, or for? World War II, okay? 1941. What happened in 1941? Early in 1941. Germany attacked the Soviet Union. What happened December 7th, 1941? Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Very good. You probably might have been saying that for the first one, 1941. But June 6, 1944 is known as what? D-Day. It's Disarmament Day. Allied invasion of Normandy, and we were able to disarm part of the war. May 8th, 1945 is known as what? VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. And then May 1948, what was significant about that month and year? Israel once again became a nation, and 1950 to 1953 was the Korean War, okay? So make sure that if you don't know those dates, you get that nailed down. All right. A few more questions, then we'll be done. The doctor who developed the vaccine for polio, Dr. Jonas Salk, who was the first Black Major League Baseball player. Jackie Robinson, good job. The first Black American to be a performing member of the Metropolitan Opera. Marianne Anderson, she was also one of the 10 most influential women in her time. That they ranked some things, and she was one of the top 10. Who was the Black woman who refused to give up her seat on a city bus, leading to the desegregation of that bus system? It was Rosa Parks. Who was a civil rights leader famous for his I Have a Dream speech? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Who was the Black Supreme Court justice who stressed the importance of moral character? That was Justice Clarence Thomas. All right, who was the first American to fly in space? To fly in space was Alan B. Shepard Jr. Alan B. Shepard Jr. Who was the first American to orbit the Earth? John Glenn. John Glenn. The first man to walk on the moon? Neil Armstrong. And the first woman appointed to the Supreme Court was Sandra Day O'Connor. And let's see, we have a few more. What legislation guarantees voting, housing, and job rights for all Americans? The 1964 Civil Rights Act. What happened on September 11th, 2001? Al-Qaeda terrorists attacked the World Trade Center in New York City, the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., and then another plane that landed in Pennsylvania. This is the worst attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor. What storm was the costliest in U.S. history? Hurricane Katrina. And back to what we said, Sandra Day O'Connor was the first woman appointed to the Supreme Court. There was a question. I just want to make sure I have the right thing. Yep, who was the president who appointed her? Who was the president when Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed? Ronald Reagan, okay? So he was trying to make sure that he was putting good Supreme Court justices in, and he put the first woman in, and she did a lot of good in her time that she was in as the Supreme Court justice. All right. Okay, so that is the questions that I had for chapter 7 through 14. Tomorrow you have another quiz on the map of South America with some slightly different things. I think I put that in for your as your homework so you can make sure to study those specific things. And tomorrow will just be the combined lesson of 168 and 169 because Thursday is the test. So make sure that you are reviewing and studying, and that you are doing well on these as well as you can. And again, we will see you in the next lesson.